Hello, everyone, and welcome to Saturday's edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy. I'm going to get you ready for Saturday's action around the SEC. 3 SEC Super Regional games on deck, including an all-SEC clash in Fayetteville. We'll get you ready for all of that, but first, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode of Weekend Waypoints this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. The sun's out and the fun is on at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Score a cool pool, savor summer flavor with a grill, prep for fishing weekends, or mount up with a new mountain bike. However you have fun, you can't lose with our top brands. Gear up online at academy.com or at your local store. All right, folks. First day of Super Regional action is gone. Not too much to note early in the day. I took in a 18-2 blowout win for North Carolina. There was a blowout win for Louisville over Miami, but then it got fun. Oregon State over Florida State in a game that looked over in the ninth inning, and Oregon State mounted quite a comeback, ends up walking that game off. And then, of course, the nightcap, and that's where we'll spend most of our time here in the early part of the show, is on Coastal 7, Auburn 6 in 10 innings. A lot happening here. My buddy Mark Etheridge was at this game, and he sent a message in our D1 internal chat that it was storming in Auburn as he was kind of approaching town. And so you knew there was just weather in the area, right? And it's that time of year. And they get 6 innings in, but then a delay comes. They come back on the field late at night. They end up finishing in the wee hours, which is in the regional. They didn't necessarily finish in the wee hours, but there were 8 o'clock local starts in the regional. So it was pretty late by the time Auburn was getting to post-game press conferences and stuff like that after the regional. So perhaps Auburn a little more used to it, but regardless, a lot happening there. We'll pull up the box score. We haven't done this in a few weeks, pull up a box score. So let's do that while we're here. There you see it. Coastal 7, Auburn 6. You can see from the line score here, Coastal jumps out to that 6-1 lead, 2 home runs for Blake and Pato early in that game, an early Caden Bodine home run, played add-on. It kind of looked like Coastal was cruising. They knocked Sam Dutton out of the game relatively early, but then you see Auburn just starts to chip away and did so. I think what was particularly impressive for me is they chipped away before and after the rain delay. So it's not like they had nothing going and then the rain delay came and then they reset and made a run, or the opposite. They scored before the rain delay. They came out from the rain delay and scored right away and tied it. Then in the 10th inning, Caden Bodine, another home run, his second home run of the game. Plenty of power in his bat, but only had 3 home runs coming into the game yesterday. And so 2 of his now 5 home runs coming in the one game to help beat Auburn. Blake Barthel, I think, is probably, at least in the late innings, most valuable player, I guess, other than Bodine, because without Bodine's homer, you don't win it. But in the 9th and 10th innings, it was almost like a replay, a diving play up the middle on a kind of a sinking line drive, and then a toss to the shortstop to double off a runner at second base. Again, like the same play in back-to-back innings to kill rallies, and then to the 10th to end the game. So impressive stuff for Coastal to bear down. Good defensive play from Barthel to make that happen. Auburn knew what it was getting into with Coastal Carolina. You knew this team was not going to be an easy opponent for Auburn. But on the other hand, I have to admit, when it got to be 6-6, I kind of thought, okay, Auburn has kind of wrestled control, and they've done a good job against Coastal's pitching staff. You click over to Coastal's pitching stats here, 3 runs off of Fluky in 5 innings. That's about as good as anybody's done this season. And then a couple runs off of Dominic Carbone. And then they put some traffic on the bases against Matthew Potok and even Ryan Lynch, but that runner got doubled off. But so, they did a lot of things right. Coastal just got one more big hit. And so moving forward, the state of play is, not that much different than it was in the first game, although I guess the difference is that, Auburn has one starting pitcher in Samuel Dutton who goes late into games, and then everybody else, whether it's Tilley or Chatterton or Alvarez or whoever, is a little more volatile in terms of what they can give you getting deep into games. So we'll have to see how that turns out. Of course, Coastal still has Jacob Morrison to go, the Sun Belt pitcher of the year. So it doesn't get any easier for Auburn in terms of the pitchers it faces, given that they're going to have to deal with Morrison here on Saturday. A fun game, though. I mean, I know it's easy for someone who doesn't have any skin in the game to call that a fun game. I mean, for Auburn, it's tough. Now you've got to come back and you've got to win back-to-back. You're at home, so you love that. The crowds are going to be great. So you'll have that, that wind at your back. But, you're going to have to win games against not one but two very good starting pitchers for Coastal. And the margin of error is just super thin. And it just kind of is what it is. All right, let's get to some comments here. Joey says, thank you, Coastal, for finally speaking up for the road super teams. Moonshine says, new shirt. No, I've had this one. This is just a cactus shirt. I've had this one for a little while. Sean Miller, question of the day. Can the Oregon State... Oh, this is the question of the day. Thank you, Sean, for bringing this important issue to the table. A question of the day. Can the Oregon State fans behind home plate keep that drinking pace up for 2 more days? Had to be 50 empties on that can wall. Yeah, for those who weren't watching or maybe didn't clock it, although they did show it on a close-up on TV, so if you're watching, I'm sure you saw it. Like, the fans right behind home plate at Oregon State just started lining up beer cans along because the fence at Oregon State is that backstop fence, at least up that high, is chain link. And so you could see right through it. And they've got a long row of beer cans, and they started a second row of beer cans. And yeah, it must have been 50 cans. It was I was impressed on 2 levels. One is, it's just even if you got there early, you've only got so much time to drink that much beer. Second of all, it was an incredible stacking job. I didn't see any sort of like, whoops, they fell over while I was trying to put this can on here. So just impressive work all around from Oregon State fans, high-level fans, those folks at Oregon State. I assume, Sean, he or she, I don't know that I really clocked the people who were doing it, but I assume they had help from people in the rest of the section, but still, impressive stamina. Mike Rooney suggested that Oregon State start that person on the mound tomorrow. Just because obviously stamina is not going to be a problem. And I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point. Greg Shute says War Rooster. That's a take on Coastal Carolina in the Chanticleer. Yeah, they earned it last night. That's for sure, Greg. Morning, Ace Man. I see you there. Morning, vis-a-vis. Moonshine mentioned Tim Corbin earlier, and Sean asked, did he do something specific? And Moonshine's referring to last weekend's press conference. I mean, yeah, Coach Corbin got fired up in the press conference. I may have mentioned this in the show last weekend. I don't remember, but your team loses in the fashion in which they lost. Obviously, you're going to have an irritated coach. I get it, but he does have a history of not always doing a good job of answering in a way that doesn't come across as demeaning or belittling or whatever. And I get it. Like we demand a lot of the pressure to win is immense in these jobs, especially at this high end, like the SEC is. Your season just ended, so you're still kind of mentally. I guess this was in the first game, so season wasn't over, but your season's on the brink, so you're mentally kind of still trying to process that. But that said, I just, most other coaches in the league understand like that the reporters have a job to do, and I know Coach Corbin understands that too on an intellectual level. But the reporters asking questions there are just doing a job. And in the same way, he's doing a job, right? His job is part of the gig, whether you like it or not, is to answer questions after the game. And you're allowed to be irritated. You're allowed to not like a question, but I just think there's a way to do it without coming across like you're talking down to reporters. That's just my opinion. But he's just a competitor. And I truly, if you separate that from the rest of Tim Corbin, I mean, he stands for a lot of things that I appreciate. Like he is genuinely a caring, kind individual who does a lot for his players and does a lot for the community in Nashville, does a lot for a lot of people. But between the lines, he's a pretty intense competitor that sometimes doesn't look like it because his demeanor is very stoic and what have you, but he's about as fiery as it gets in terms of competing, and it comes out in the press conferences. And I'm sure he regrets some of it along the way, but again, I don't like it, but he does have a little bit of a history of that. Okay, important stuff. Sean Miller is on this beer thing at Oregon State. I think 6 Bs from what I could tell, 4 guys, 2 ladies. The wall came crumbling down, the celebration in the 9th inning comeback. I mean, that makes sense. I guess you're jumping up and down. You're probably gonna, you're probably gonna kick them over on accident. But thank you for your research there, Sean. I'll be watching again. I'll be watching honestly more intently than I otherwise would, just to keep up with the beer situation there. All right. Brandon Petre says, in what inning will the warning come for both benches in Tennessee versus Arkansas? And then will West Virginia be able to handle the 104 feels like at LSU? Woof. So your first question, I don't think there's any inning in which it's too early to put that on the board. I just don't think there's no such thing as too early to put that on the board. That is happening. Tempers are going to run hot. That is just the reality of the situation. I do not wish to switch places with those umpires because that is a tough job. Going into that game that you're going to make a lot of folks angry because you're either going to, first of all, there's going to be a decent number of both fans there, obviously mostly Arkansas fans, but you're going to make one side angry. But then also when that inevitably happens, the moment when stuff starts to blow up a little bit, you're going to have to make a choice of, do we step in and go heavy-handed here? Or do we try to let them play and just try to maybe verbally calm things down? But then that is going to inevitably lead to a bigger blow up, and then people are going to be mad at you for not stepping in earlier. So it really is like a lose-lose situation for those umpires. But yeah. And then on the WVU question, which Sam Rogers asks a similar question, thoughts on LSU, WVU today? WVU really pushed UNC last year with Auburn behind the 8 ball, over under 1.5 teams in CWS. Can LSU pull out that second team? Yeah, so max 3, but guaranteed 1 for SEC. It's just a matter of Auburn and LSU. I'll go over. I really like LSU here. As Brandon mentioned, I think the 104 feels like temperature. I think that helps. But I don't know. It feels like 104 is hot for everybody, even if you've been playing baseball in Baton Rouge all season. Or if you grew up in Louisiana or the Gulf Coast or what have you, that's just hot. So it is going to affect both teams, I think. But LSU should be in a better position to deal with it. I think West Virginia is a scrappy team. And sometimes scrappy gets used as a way to describe a team you don't think is actually that good, but they fight and they win more games than you think. And that's not actually what I mean with West Virginia. What I mean there is on the mound, it's not a ton of stuff. But, man, they know how to use their pitches. Griffin Kern, the starter that LSU is going to see today, not a big strikeout guy, not a big whiff guy, but his ERA is in the low 3s. It's a low 90s fastball. But every coach I talk to about Griffin Kern says that hitters just don't see it. They don't see it like you think you would, given that the stuff is just kind of it doesn't pop off the page when you look at his velocities and you watch the shape of his pitches. And it's just like, okay, why doesn't this guy get hit harder? And nobody really has a great answer for that. He's just somebody that hitters just don't see well, though he does not have a ton of whiff. So I think if you're LSU, you should feel confident and look, we're not going to go out there and just the guy, even at his best, Griffin Kern's not going to be a guy that's going to just mow us down. We're going to have the ball in play. We're going to have opportunities. It's going to be all about the big hit for LSU, which I know has been a little bit of a sticking point sometimes for that offense when you're trying to stack 3 and 4 hits together in an inning to put up a crooked number. So, but I think that's going to be the key because I think there'll be traffic on the bases. It's just a matter of getting the big hit. And then offensively, they've got some power. Kyle West is probably their best power guy. They play in a bigger ballpark in West Virginia, so some of that, and it's colder there for longer, so some of that depresses their power numbers. But more than that, they're just good hitters. Jace Reinhardt has 21 doubles in the year. Sam White has 16 doubles on the year. They tend to be kind of a doubles hitting team. They've stolen over 100 bases on the season. So maybe a comp is like Kentucky 2 years ago, a little more talented in the lineup. Kentucky 2 years ago was the kind of bunt and run team versus Kentucky last year actually just had a flat out good offense. But 2 years ago, it was like the Kentucky, bunt and run situation. it was a changeup for teams. And I think it'll be a little bit of that for LSU, just given that West Virginia is going to try to put the ball in play. They don't strike out a ton. Their best hitters in particular don't strike out a ton. Sam White, 21 strikeouts on the year. Armani Guzman, 23 strikeouts on the year. They don't have any regular. They have Grant Hussey with 53 strikeouts. But other than that, everybody's 36 strikeouts or under for the season. So the ball is going to be in play. And it's just a matter of if they can find enough holes. They're probably not going to out-homer you. So there's that. But they are going to scratch and claw to make things happen offensively. I like LSU in this matchup. Look, to me, it comes down to if Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson pitch to their potential or even close to it, I think there's no other questions to be asked. I just, if those two are on their game, I don't know if there's really any team, unless they happen to come up against, Tennessee and Liam Doyle, right? And you just get outdone, or Florida State and Jamie Arnold, or one of these other big time aces, right, that could shut down their offense. I think in 99% of cases, if Anderson and Ianson are on their game, that's kind of all she wrote. It feels as simple as that, honestly. But hoping for a good series. I think you're right that like West Virginia is probably not. They're not going to run away from LSU, but also I don't know that LSU is going to run away from them necessarily. And if they do, it'll be just because West Virginia doesn't score enough and LSU scores 6 or 7. But I think WVU is going to hang in there. Like the Tigers, but I think WVU will hang. Sean asked another Highway to Hoover request. House settlement finally approved. Players on rosters or cut to make the new 34 limit will be exempt from the roster limit for the rest of their careers. Players on rosters or cut. Oh, okay. Yeah. Got it. Okay. We'll certainly get into that on Highway to Hoover, the house stuff. I need to, frankly, just because of the time of year it is, like I haven't had a lot of time to really like zero in on what that means. But yes, we will certainly talk about that and maybe even bring out an expert, honestly, because Mark and I, we're a couple pretty smart guys, but I don't know that, like, it's just such a complicated situation. And then, Sean, in theory, you could take 10 of these players and have a 44-man roster for a year or two. Interesting strategy options if you like the players. Yeah, you could like hold them. It's almost like a JV team, right? Like that you could hold on to, and they'd be exempt the next year, like a redshirt situation or what have you. All right. Donovan Adams asked about the LSU series. If you're just joining, Donovan, you can go back a few minutes. I like LSU. I think WVU is tough, but I like LSU. Sam Rogers says, great day in Chapel Hill. Looked like Arizona struggled with the heat, not that dry heat out west. Yeah, it was I was there in Chapel Hill, and I was sitting outside, which I kind of like to do when teams have like outdoor media setups. As long as there's power to plug in a laptop, that's the caveat there, because otherwise it can be kind of dicey. But because you just get the atmosphere. But man, it was sticky. It was sticky when we walked into the area where UNC does post-game press conferences. There were 3 folks in the lobby of this building being treated for heat exhaustion of some kind, and so it was that kind of day. My car said 97 when I got in. It wasn't actually that hot, but much like Baton Rouge today, it was just one of those days where the humidity made it feel so much more stifling than what the thermometer was gonna say. Joey says, what's your go-to coffee at home? I'm simple, Joey. This is literally just a Tim Hortons K-Cup. I buy Tim Hortons coffee K-Cups in like the giant box, like 80 at a time, and just run through those. If I'm feeling fancy, I'll put a little dash of some sort of creamer in it, but most of the time it's just straight up Tim Hortons K-Cups. I'm just one person. I drink 1 cup of coffee a day, so I don't really have a reason to make a whole pot. So that's why I go with K-Cups. I'm pretty simple, easy to please in that regard. Sean Miller says, if Anderson and Ianson are themselves, will be fine. If one stubs his toe, it could get dicey. This is the team that almost lost to Little Rock after all, but I think they cruise this weekend. I mean, it's a good point, Sean. Like, even if it is a relatively slim chance, if one of them does have a tough start, you're right, and that game 3s have been tricky for LSU at times, and we saw that last weekend. So I think it's a good point. Like, this series gets really interesting if one of those two just doesn't have it for whatever reason. That would be really interesting. Randy Peterson says the weather delay really didn't bother Auburn, and they should have won in the bottom of the ninth. Just didn't pull it out. Hopefully today we bounce back. Yeah, I think if Randy, if you're an Auburn fan, I think, or Randy and all Auburn fans, I think you should feel pretty good about. You're right there. The ball in the night just didn't squeak through. It's easy to see a scenario where that ball gets through, or it takes a little short hop under Barthel's glove and pops up and gets away from him. Like a lot of scenarios you could see. I could just imagine a scenario where it goes very differently there. But I think the fight was great for Auburn. The fact that they were able to score runs before and after the rain delay, like they were clearly like still locked in and still ready to go. Coastal's just good, and you're gonna have to play good baseball the next 2 days to win the series. So you knew this was going to be a fight. I know Butch Thompson and crew, from being there last weekend, they knew it was they were going to be dealing with a little bit of a buzzsaw, and they were right there with them. Would not be shocked if Auburn comes back and wins the next 2, but man, they're going to have to. A lot of things are going to have to go right, obviously. Randy says probably should have kept Griffin Graves in one more inning. Yeah. Coastal had one hit off lefties. Bullpen decisions are always dicey, right? Like that's just such a difficult thing. Do you want to take the guy out 1 out too early or 1 out too late? And it depends on how you define those things, right? That's why that's what the money is for, to use a phrase from Mad Men. Just in coaching, those are the tough decisions you have to make. And now they become even more important, though, Randy, as you know, because just like you can't. I mean, Dutton didn't give you the depth you were looking for, but you knew going into the weekend you weren't going to be able to bank on starting pitcher length necessarily, right? It was going to have to be kind of about bullpen usage and where you're able to go to who. And I know they didn't love to have gone to Myers as early as they had to go to. That's the second week in a row. Last week it was for Tilly, of course, but they probably didn't love that. The good news is Myers can probably come back. Maybe not today unless it's a really short outing, but 29 pitches, maybe you can bring him back. I would say anybody but Griffin Graves probably is good to go, just because Graves threw those 3 innings and was really, really good. Joey mentions Corbin has seemed to not like Aria Gerson from the Tennessean for years. I actually don't know that it's that personal, but Aria asks tough questions, and that's her job, and it's his right to not like the questions, right? So Aria is a friend. You guys know that. I mention her on this podcast quite a bit because she does a great job, especially on social media, with stats and facts and little nuggets and what have you. But she's just doing a job, and so is he. And sometimes those two things butt heads. I just wish the individual in the room who is paid handsomely for that to be part of his job did a better job in the moment of answering those questions in a respectful way. I don't feel like that's too much to ask, to be honest. Just my take. Sean Miller says, hope the Athens regional ump crew isn't in Fayetteville this week. Straight to MTV Wildin' Out episode in Georgia games. Then Duke gets player ejected for having a hat in his hand. Yeah, it is kind of crazy how different that. Yeah, some of those Georgia games had crazy atmospheres just in the dugouts. And then AJ Gracia carrying a hard hat in his hand ends up getting suspended for Duke today. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know what you do if you're an umpire in that game. Lindsey Crosby says, Joe, it's too early for Auburn fans to catch this live. Yeah, game 2 of that series, which Butch Thompson described as immovable in post-game yesterday, game time wise. They're going at it about 12 hours after everyone left the ballpark yesterday. So let's get a quick turnaround for everyone involved there. Thoughts and prayers. Lindsay, you can tell George I said that it's on him to bring a little extra coffee or donuts or something for the troops there to keep morale high, or just Mark, maybe Mark could do that too. All right, let's see. Joe, in North Carolina, talking about humidity versus dry heat while wearing a saguaro cactus shirt feels a little too on the nose. This is me wishing for drier heat. That's what this is. It's hoping it'll have some sort of effect. Good question here from Nick Hammonds. What do you think about reseeding teams once they make super regionals? I feel like Florida State should be hosting. I agree. I think Tennessee fans would also agree with you because then they would have I mean, that Tennessee-Arkansas, which we'll get onto here in just a second, like that feels like an Omaha matchup, right? And I know why it is the way it is. Like Tennessee didn't play well down the stretch in the regular season, and so they fell down the seed line. That's the way it works. But just on talent and ability, it feels like a CWS matchup. I mean, heck, before the season, if you'd have told me that's a CWS finals matchup, I would have believed you, right? So I can understand the reasons for it, Nick, although I will say I like the randomness of it, right? Like I like the idea that Duke ended up playing Murray State and vice versa, right? Because Murray State could have easily had to go on the road to an SEC team with 10,000 fans in the stands and all that kind of stuff, depending on where their draw was. But that's the way it played out. And so I kind of like the randomness of that. Now, if you're a Florida State fan and you're having to go on the road across by the way, like to the furthest possible super regional site from where you are, I get why that's frustrating. But I do like just kind of the randomness of, hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles. And sometimes you end up across from the regional that blows up and you end up with a 4 seed. And then sometimes you end up chalk ends up holding and you end up playing a team that you didn't think you'd see until Omaha. So I like that, but I can understand why it's frustrating if you're on the other end of it for sure. Sean says, I haven't looked at the schedule, but we better get some squeeze play today. Put Coach Rooney to work. He did a lot of work last night in that rain delay, Sean. He may or may not have sent a message in our D1 baseball internal chat requesting that someone pull the fire alarm in their studio so that he and Chris Budden didn't have to keep filling time during that rain delay. I can confirm there will be a more traditional squeeze play today. So if you're missing Coach Rooney, and who among us does not, they will be on the air today, he and Chris Budden, for squeeze a more traditional squeeze play setup versus what they did yesterday, because there's a lot of games. There's 8 games today. So one of which is Tennessee and Arkansas. That starts at 5 Eastern, 4 Central. Patrick Ebert will be there for D1 baseball. He'll be doing the writing. Jack DeLongchamp also there. He'll be doing the social media stuff, the typical pencil talk stuff that Jack does, which is a whole lot of fun. No better place for him to be this weekend to do that kind of stuff than in Fayetteville. Big time pitching matchup, Liam Doyle, Zach Root. If you're Arkansas here, you're looking to do enough against Liam Doyle to not let him get rolling. Maybe you're hoping maybe he's not quite as sharp because he had that Monday relief appearance. I mean, that's been 5 days ago, but still, you're kind of hoping that maybe has an effect. And you're hoping that the Zach Root, that the ball is sinking and he's able to get ground balls and stay out of trouble. And that this ends up living up to the hype. Tons of storylines here. Obviously, there's the Tony V, Dave Van Horn angle. Tony was an assistant for Dave Van Horn, as I think most people listening to this or watching this are aware. There's that. The fact that it's that's right. Phillips is starting today. That's right. Thank you, Joey. I did see that. That's on me. Yeah. So he mentions Phillips. I mean, still, I think a lot of it still applies, right? Like you want to, if you're Arkansas, thank you, Joey. I did see that. I just that's muscle memory of putting Doyle down for their first game. I think a lot of the same things still apply though. Like you want to fight Phillips because you want to put runners on. You want to give Arkansas is not a big running team. I think that's good news for Marcus Phillips and for Tennessee. But still, if you're Arkansas, you do want to put runners on just to try to give them something to think about. But it is going to come down to you just cannot let Marcus Phillips, if you're Arkansas, you can't let Marcus Phillips get rolling. Because in terms of run prevention, the hitting against him has not been a concern. It's just when runners get on, what are they able to do? But when the bases are clean and when he's holding runners and all that, he's been great. So I think that's still, and certainly the root piece of it still applies for Arkansas. You want that thing to sink. You want to keep the ball in the ballpark. You don't want to leave it up to what's the weather doing today, what's the wind doing today. Is the ball just flying in a way that's going to make it hard to keep the ball in the ballpark? that's going to be huge for Arkansas. But it makes sense that Doyle a day back. You want to give him that extra rest. And if you're able to steal this one today, Liam Doyle on the mound. Well, even either way it goes, right? You've got Liam Doyle on the mound in an elimination game if they lose, if Tennessee loses today, or Liam Doyle to clinch your spot in the Super Regional if you win today. So either way, I think you feel pretty good about having Doyle on the second day. Should be a fun pitching matchup. Phillips and Zach Root. Other storylines. Honestly, 2 national title contenders, it feels like. I said yesterday, I think whoever wins the series is going to be the betting favorite in Vegas to win the national title. I just think that's part of that's just going to be because there's going to be so many eyeballs on this series. Maybe the biggest on-campus event in Arkansas athletics history. I mean, obviously, there's a bunch of football games that have had bigger crowds, and because it's football, all that stuff. But football doesn't play its postseason on campus, or at least not until last year when we had the expanded playoff. But generally speaking, postseason football and basketball, by the way, are not played on campus. So in terms of on-campus events, this might be the biggest that Arkansas athletics has had. When you consider the stakes, the opponent, all that stuff. One more question here. Ryan asked, if UNC wraps up today, any chance you go over to Duke on Sunday for the Murray State series? Yes. If UNC wraps up early and Murray State is still happening, yes, I will bounce over to Durham. Aaron Fitt is covering that one. Like, he's got the full coverage there, but if I'm done, I might as well go over there and, do some bonus coverage. And also just selfishly, like, I kind of want to see what a super regional at Duke is like. I've been to games at Duke, and it's not the atmosphere you see in the SEC. They've done a lot to make that ballpark better. They added more seats this week to try to dress it up a little bit. They can only do what they can do, though. But I kind of want to see what that's like. So if there is an extra, if that series goes on longer than the one I'm covering, I will make it over there. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. Sean, I see that. I will do my best to make that happen. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this and every episode of Weekend Waypoints. Thank you all for commenting, for the questions, for joining me live here, or for watching this after the fact, if that's what you are indeed doing. Enjoy the baseball today, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we'll recap it all on Sunday's Weekend Waypoints. Take care, everybody.